Hey, I'm Steve at Dabble Lab, and in this video I'm going to walk through my process for using generative AI to generate books. This is part of my Dabble AI project. If you're following that, this is the video that I said I would create. If you aren't following it, you can find it at dabble.ai. Essentially, the Dabble AI project, I'm trying to break down all of the individual tasks that are part of a business to see if I can use AI to coordinate AI agents to start a business autonomously and run it autonomously. So just kind of going through the process to learn. But the book writing part of it was just an idea for a business model. So if AI could write a book start to finish and publish it, maybe that could be a model that would be autonomous. And I thought about this a few years ago and started working on some book automation stuff a few years ago when I was writing this book, which was one of the first books about GPT that was published by Pack Publishing in 2021, which was even before the public release of GPT. This is not a plug for the book. This book is really outdated, so don't buy it. But I started this process when I was working on this and essentially used GPT to write pieces of the book. The steps I'm using today are way different, and I'm in the process of changing them also. But the big challenge that I'm having with the goal for the Dabble AI project, the goal for the Dabble AI project is to have the AI do everything. So my time would be almost zero or near zero. And I can get AI to write a book with pretty much zero time. And there's lots of videos on that if you want to see how that's done. That's not what I'm going to be talking about here. But when you read those books, it's pretty clear that it was AI generated when you get past maybe chapter 1 or sometimes past paragraph 1. And so what I wanted to try to figure out is, like, is there some way to have the best of both worlds, like something that when you read it, it's not obvious that it was AI generated, but at the same time, it's not taking as long as a book would take to write without AI. So when I did this one, it took about 11 months, start to finish, and over 1,000 hours. And almost because of the topic, almost immediately it was outdated. And that is a big challenge with book writing, because the effort that goes into making those updates and changes with this kind of topic is, it's just too much work for too little a window of time before the stuff is changed. And then what happens is, if you put books out there and they're out of date, obviously that's not going to do a whole lot for the reviews, which isn't going to help sales at all. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of how I'm doing things today, and I'm going to start with the OpenAI assistants. And I'm going to use OpenAI assistants, which I'll talk about in a minute if you're not familiar with those. Because there's no code writing, you can do everything from a graphical interface. So if you've never written code before, you can follow along on this. The way that I was doing it before and how I did it for the Exploring GPT-3 book, I did have to write a lot of code that would basically send prompts, like loop through sending prompts back to the GPT platform or the OpenAI API to generate the book sort of iteratively. A lot of code was involved, and there's other tools out there that you can get that I've seen that are doing the same thing, but they're more code intensive, or you've got to install some other system like Baby AGI or AutoGen or something like that. I am using AutoGen and some of those other tools, which maybe I'll talk about in another video. But for this video, I'm just going to focus on how you would go about this process with the OpenAI assistants. And so this is different than Chat GPT if you're not familiar with this. So if you can have a Chat GPT account, and there's GPTs, which are kind of like assistants. You can set those up to do specific tasks. And it might make sense to even like define like assistance, because this term can get confusing, I think, because it's used differently on different platforms. So I see assistants and agents and bots, and these are all kind of interchangeable. I don't know if there's like a hard definition for each, but I use assistants and agents kind of interchangeably. That term I use, it's like I'll say agents or assistants and I'm meaning the same thing, but essentially it is an agent that is going to do some defined work, and it could be a very, very small task, or it could be a combination of agents that are being used to perform some bigger task that's part of a larger workflow. For example, like in a business, I've got like a number of agents or assistants set up here that do different things, from like market analysis and customer support to generating voiceovers and validating business models and things like that. So you can use agents to perform and train them and guide them to perform very, very specific tasks, and then kind of group them all together to perform bigger tasks. And that's the idea behind agent swarming, if you've heard that term, or basically breaking down all of the workflow into individual tasks and then creating agents for each one of those tasks. But in the case of a book, it's you can really just do it with one agent. Maybe you would break it down to multiple agents, but if you're doing it for your own purposes, it's probably easier just to use one agent. So let's just get into that. And so you first need to log into platform.openai.com. If you don't have an account, you'll need to create one. I think you will need to pay for it now. So I just do the pay-as-you-go account, and I've got a lot of things running. They're not open to the public, so it's not getting a lot of traffic, but I think I'm paying like $15 or $20 a month, something like that. I don't know exactly, but it's not more than $20 a month for the stuff I'm doing. You start, once you've logged in, you go to the assistance menu item on the left-hand side, and if you haven't been here before, this will show up as blank, and you do create an assistant. In creating an assistant, you just give it a name. I'm gonna for the Dabble AI project, I was working on an assistant to generate a game theory book. So I'll just call this game theory book generator book assistant. The instructions are really where all the magic happens, so I'm going to come back to this. The instructions are think of this as like if you were hiring an employee, you would give them a job description, and ideally you'd also give them sort of operating manuals and procedures and details about how to do the job. That's all the stuff that we're going to give the assistant in here in the instructions. The model is the underlying machine learning model, foundation model that you're going to be using, or that the assistant's going to be using to do its work. If you have a paid account, you should have access to the GPT-4 models, which are the ones that I prefer, but you can also, and again, I don't know if the non-paid account is still an option, but if it is, they don't include GPT-4, they include the GPT 3.5 models, which will also work. But for this, I'm going to use the November 6 preview, the 11.6 preview. And in addition to the instructions are sort of the guidelines and the context that the assistant is going to operate under. But the assistant can also do work beyond just generating text. And this is where the assistants are different from what you might be used to with ChatGPT or just GPT before the GPT-4 models. But specifically, the tools allow you to execute functions. Actually, it's not really executing in here, so we're not going to be using this for the book generation. The function execution would be like if you had some specific code that you wrote and you needed the assistant to recognize when that code needs to be run and collect the information needed to run that code. So, for example, if you were in a conversation needing to like save information on some other server or collect information that's saved, a survey or something like that, you would use functions to do that. But we're not going to be writing code, so we're not going to use functions. We're going to just do all of this through the graphical interface here. Code interpreter is going to be using code though, but the difference here is that with code interpreter, the assistant's going to be writing and running the code. You don't have to write any of the code, and this is awesome. Like, this is probably like my favorite thing about where all of the AI and the large language model progress is headed. More and more, the assistants are not just generating content, but they're able to write code, test code, run code, fix code, all of those things. But to make that happen, there needs to be a runtime environment for that code to run, and this is provided out of the box by OpenAI with the assistants, which is kind of cool. So it spins up, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but like a Docker container or something like that, if you're familiar with that, to run the code kind of behind the scenes, or like maybe an Anaconda environment or something, because it all runs Python code. So I'm guessing that's how it works behind the scenes, but it's not anything that we have to worry about. So we just toggle on code interpreter, and you'll see how this works in a second, because I'm going to give you an example. And then retrieval, this is RAG is the acronym, but basically this is the ability to provide data that the assistant will have access to, that can be used in conjunction with the completions that it's going to be creating. So to explain that another way, this is kind of its knowledge base. So if you have information that wouldn't be readily available to GPT, so it wasn't part of the training when the model was created, that stuff can be provided in files using this retrieval tool here. So you toggle on retrieval and then add the files you want to bring in there. For our purposes, this is going to act more like a long-term memory, and specifically, like, we're going to create an outline for the book and chapters and chapter titles that we're going to want to save, so that we can reference those as we go back and forth without having to make sure that they're provided in the prompt each time that we send it. So we're going to use it as kind of like a long-term memory, so we can come back and we can create this book over time. So once we get to this point, and I know I've done a lot of talking, so you can do this a lot faster than I'm going through it, but you give it a name. We'll come back to the instructions, pick a model, pick the latest model, and then toggle on functions and code interpreter, and then just choose save. At this point, you can click on the test button up here, and that's going to take you into the playground. And the playground is a test environment, but if you're using this to generate your own books, it's all you need. So you can use the test environment as your work environment. I say it's all you need. I also use Visual Studio Code, which I'll show you in a second here, because when I'm writing the instructions, they can get long. And so you might want to write the instructions in some other editor. You can expand here and write all the instructions here, but I just find it like easier to write them in like something else. So like I use Visual Studio Code, and the reason that I use Visual Studio Code to do this is, well, first, because I like it and I'm familiar with it and used to it. You could just as easily use Word or whatever you're comfortable with. But the other reason that I use this is because I have also Copilot installed here, and that will do completions for me. So like I can have the AI writing basically instructions for the AI that's going to be the assistant, and that is why I choose this. Now there's Copilot for Office 365, and so you could do all of this like in Microsoft Word and get the same thing. But again, I'm just used to and comfortable with Visual Studio Code, so that's how I do it. What the instructions that I'm going to provide first are going to be instructions to create a list of chapters. And so we're going to basically tell the assistant what it is, like the job description. You're an assistant that's helping write a book about game theory, and how they go about doing that. And I break this into parts, so I'm going to be updating the assistant's role as I go through each one of the stages, or the assistant's instructions. And you can think of this kind of like, if you hired somebody in real life, they would be getting a promotion maybe, or getting more responsibility. So each time they get a promotion, you give them a new set of operating instructions. And that's kind of metaphorically what we're doing here. So I'm just going to copy this because I already created it. But you're an assistant that's helping to write a book about game theory, and you begin by generating a list of suggested chapter titles and numbers. And then you ask if the user, if they would like to make any modifications. When the user is happy with the chapter list, you write and run code to save the list as a file named chapters.yml, which is a data format YAML. If you're not familiar with that, it's just a text. It's a human readable format that is text-based that also machines can read. So it makes it easy for us to look at and machines to use. This is really the key here, and I'll just show you this. Like the write and run code is probably like the coolest part here, but the instructions are what's going to make all this happen. So there is exactly what I took over from Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to save it. And now once it's saved, I can run the assistant. And when you run the assistant, it's going to create a thread, and a thread is like a conversation context. And the thread is going to have messages in it, and there's three kinds of messages. There's a system message, which is this first one here, and those are basically the instructions. And then there's messages that the assistant creates, which in this case, because the instructions told the assistant how to start, the assistant is starting the conversation, essentially. And then user messages, which are messages from me or the user responding back to, in this case, the first message that the assistant created. But you can see here, because of the instructions, it's generated an initial list of chapter titles for the book on game theory. And it's created 16 chapters, which for this, I'm not going to go through and actually edit this and decide which chapters I would want or don't want, but the reason I follow this workflow is because I do want to do that. So if you want to create a book that feels like it was truly written by a human, it's very difficult to do that with just like a single prompt. And there are tools that have made it a lot better. The like AutoGen and Baby AGI and AutoGPT. There's a number of other tools that are kind of set up to like let one prompt create additional prompts automatically to build the book end to end. But like I said, at least right now, the times that I've done that, when I read the book, it's just not something that I would want to publish. And so I see this as more of a tool to collaborate with the assistant to create the book. So right here at this point, I could say something like, well, let's keep it to just 5 chapters, which is a short book, but this is more to illustrate the point here. Or I could have also said, like, let's remove chapters 4, 8, 13, or let's change the name of this chapter, that chapter. But basically, I'm collaborating with the assistant to create the chapters. Once I've gotten to the point where I'm happy with the chapters, then I can just say, yeah, this looks good. This looks good to me. And punctuation is not necessary. Capitalization is not necessary. That's just habit. But at this point, because of the instructions that we provided, it is now using code interpreter, which remember is its environment to write and not just write code, but run code. It can write code just by spitting the code back to you, but we don't want it to just write the code and spit it back. We want it to write the code and then actually execute the code to do what the code is supposed to be accomplishing, which in this case is creating that YAML file. So if you are a coder, you can click here and look at the code if that's something that you're interested in doing. If you don't code, that might not be of any interest to you at all. But it's always for anybody that is watching that does code, that the code is always written in Python. And Python is a great language because it is really pretty easy to understand. Even if you've never written a line of code in your life, you can kind of look at it and go, oh, okay, I see what's happening. Like here's the list of the chapters, and then down here you can see like it's got a file path, so it's writing the file to that path, and that's exactly what's happening. So like here now it's created the file chapters.yaml, YAML. And if I click this down here, it'll take me to the file, which I can then like download to my local computer here, which is going to go into my downloads directory on my local computer. You'll also find it in here. So in the platform, the OpenAI platform, if you go to the menu on the left-hand side, you'll see files, and you'll see the file in there. So there is the file that was just created. You could now go back to the assistant, and it now can access that file. So I could give it, just to illustrate it, I'll go like this. I'll take that file path here and just say, can you confirm that you have access to this file? Whoops. And so it's writing code again to do this. So it's using the code interpreter. Writing code to check to see if that file exists. So yeah, I can confirm that I have access to the file. So you could, as you update the instructions now, include that path. A better way to do it, in my experience, is to associate the file with this assistant so that you don't have to reference the file name. You can just say to the assistant, use your knowledge base or something like that. And the way that you would do that is by going down here. Remember I explained the retrieval tool. You can just go add, and then you would attach that file. And now I'm uploading the file again from my local computer and saving it. There's a way that you can also associate the file from the files in here rather than uploading it again, but that requires code, so that's why I'm not showing that in this video. But now let's clear this out and let's update the instructions, because now we have the chapters that we're going to work from. So we would move on to the next part of the workflow, which is to generate the content basically for the chapters. So that would be the topics and the content. So this I'm referring to as part 2. This is where our assistant gets a promotion. And well, let me talk about this before I do that. So now I'm updating the instructions to, you're an assistant that's helping to write a book about game theory, same as before. You get a list of the book's chapters from your knowledge base. So now because the knowledge base was just added, I uploaded that chapters list. It can reference that. And then you ask the user for the chapter that they'd like to work on, and then you generate a numbered list of topics for the chapter using the knowledge base to get the chapter numbers and titles. And after you're happy with the topic list, you ask the user if they'd like to start generating content for each topic. After generating the content for the topic, you make sure the user's happy with the topic content before moving on to the next topic. When you're done with the content for all the topics, you write and run code to save the content for the chapter as a file named chapter, whatever number, YML, YAML. So what we're doing here is basically saying, using that chapter's list, ask the user what chapter they want, and then like loop through a process over and over until that chapter is done. And this is the collaboration workflow where you're gonna look at what the assistant generates, you're gonna decide if you like it or want to change it, and then you're gonna move on to the next one. This workflow, at least right now, with the state of these language models and what they can do, is, in my opinion, the only way you're going to get to a book that really feels like it was written by a human, that was actually written by an AI, because a human's editing it and reviewing it and guiding the AI. But you could probably just have it write the entire thing and then go back and like edit the entire book. But that would be that would be a much bigger job. So I'm pretty confident that this workflow would save you a ton of time over that workflow. Although I haven't like tested it for sure, but you could probably create an AI assistant to review the work that the AI created also. I haven't tested that, but that is probably very doable. Okay, so now I've updated the instructions for the assistant, and I'm going to run this again so that it gets the new instructions. And then with these instructions, it's still running right now. You can see the little GIF down there or whatever. So once this finishes up, yeah, so it's followed the instructions that I gave it, and now it's telling me I have a list of the book chapters that it got from the knowledge base, which we uploaded in the previous step, and then it's generated some suggested topics that would be appropriate for this chapter, or for the oh, it actually is just listing the topics or the chapters. Okay. Actually, this brings up another good point. It's like, even though you provided instructions, it might do things a little bit differently each time. And so if it does something that you don't want it to do, you just need to update the instructions. And so there's no programming, but there's still, you still have to think through the process, and you've got to refine the process. Again, just like if you were working with a human assistant, the first day that they started, they might have a lot of questions that you have to help with and answer. But as time goes on, as you've answered those questions and as you like work through misunderstandings and things like that, it's going to get better and better. The same is true here. So as you update these instructions, the instructions are going to keep guardrails on the assistant that make it do a increasingly better job at achieving whatever it is that you're trying to do, in this case, create a book. So I'm going to just say that, like, let's just say let's work on chapter 1. And because it provided numbers, I'm going to just say 1. And then our instructions now are to generate a list of suggested topics for the chapter. So it's going to use the title and the context that's provided in the other chapters to do that, to generate some suggested topics, including the chapter names and the information in the retrieval in the files of the long-term memory is really important for creating like continuity between the chapters. For example, like when you're writing and you know you're moving on to a new topic, you might say something like, now that we talked about whatever, let's move on and talk about whatever. Those kinds of little nuanced things, if you just have the AI write it start to finish, are definitely not going to be guaranteed. And so if you want more control over the structure of the book, the idea flow and all of that, this is the process to use. So let's see what it did here. So game theory system, it appears there have been errors in attaining the quote for chapter 1. Let's see. Now that we've confirmed the chapter, all right, let's proceed and create a number of topics for the, okay, so yes, let's do that. Okay, go. We'll let this finish up. Oh, well, here we go, it's already done. So again, same thing, just like when we went through the chapters, we have the option because of the instructions to like go change this out. So maybe we just want to say the same thing, like let's keep it to just 3. And I'm doing that just to keep this short, to get through it. This, you want to, of course, read through those and decide if those are the topics that you want. And the other point I want to make here is this process kind of assumes that you have an idea of what should be in the book too. So this would work better for somebody that is familiar with the topic or a subject matter expert. If you weren't a subject matter expert, you could also create an assistant that would go out to the web and do research to validate and get references and stuff like that. So you can cluster assistants together to do as complex a workflow as you want. And although I'm not talking about that in this video, that's something I might cover in the future in another video. But okay, so here are the 3 topics. We'll just pretend that these are good. I'm not even going to read them, but looks good. And what's going to happen again because of the instructions is it's going to ask me if I want to work on the content for each one of the sections. And by me working on the content, mostly I mean the assistant is going to work on the content, but I will still have input. So for each one, I'll be able to great. Let's start on the content for each topic. We'll begin with the first topic, fundamentals of game theory, a brief history. Okay, game theory. And then in real life, I would read through this and decide if this works or if I want to change it or like suggest sentences be added or removed or whatever. And you can be as detailed in here as you would be if you were working with a human assistant. Looks good. And you can see here it's asking me, it's following our instructions. If you're satisfied with it, we can move on to the next subtopic. And I don't know if I'll wait to go through all 3 of these just because I'm not sure that's a good use of time for this video. You probably get the idea. If you don't, you can certainly leave comments and ask me. But essentially, once we've now like gone through this, at the very end of this process, once we've completed, let's say great. As I'm talking, I'll try to let this finish, but as it goes through and creates the content, it's going to get to the end of the topic list for this chapter, and at that point, it's going to use the code interpreter to take all of that content and generate a new file called chapter, whatever the chapter number is, so in this case 1, and that, again, is because of these instructions that we gave it down here. When it gets to that point, I'm going to follow the same process. I'm going to download the file, and then I'm going to add the file to its knowledge base, its long-term memory. And the reason that I'm going to do that is twofold. One, because as I create the subsequent chapters, I might want it to reference back to a previous chapter. So for example, I might want to include instructions that say, when you lead in, like during the introduction on a new chapter, reference the previous chapter. I guess that would make more sense for a summary. So like in a summary of a chapter, you might say, reference the next chapter that's going to be talked about, or summarize what's already been talked about. And it can get all of that information because it's got access to it in its memory or knowledge base. Let's see if we're to the end here. Please let me know if this content is yours here. Yeah, so it's going through all the topics and subtopics, which is going to take a little while. So I'm not gonna have you wait through all of that. So I'll explain the last part. So what's going to happen here is once we're done generating the content, like I just explained, we'll have a new file called like chapter 1, and then chapter 2, chapter 3, and we'll keep uploading those. When we get to the end, we've completed all of the content for all of the chapters. Then we go on to part 3, and part 3 is basically just, this is a simple instruction. So we're actually all the way down here for part 3, so step 9. So we're going to write instructions to have the assistant merge all of those files into one YAML file. So we'll have a single YAML file that will include all of the data from all of the chapter files. At that point, we have a file that is essentially the book. But the reason that we're saving it in a YAML file is because then we can use that file as the data source for generating the book in any format that we want. So if we want to generate a PDF, we can do that. If we want to generate like markdown version of the book for publishing online, we can do that. If you want to create like an EPUB version or a Microsoft Word version or whatever, you can literally just explain what you want to the assistant in the instructions. So for example, if you wanted to generate like a Microsoft Word version, so if you plan on publishing this on KDP, which is like Amazon's self-publishing platform, if you want to sell it on Amazon, you would just provide instruction. They take it in a Word format. Actually, they have like a tool that you import the Word format into. But anyway, you start with like a Microsoft Word format, and so you could say in the instructions, using the final book YAML, generate or write and execute code to generate a Word document that includes all of the chapters of the book. And then you would be able to download the entire book from here, and at that point you're done. And so not completely done. There's going to be other things, of course. There's like front matter and back matter and all of those like detailed things, designing a cover. You could also create assistants to do all of that stuff, of course. And pulling all of this together and all of those individual assistants is what's going, or the agents, assistants, is what's going to enable you to automate the entire workflow end to end. But this is my workflow for creating books, or the ones that I've been working on. I'm moving this to or I'm doing it in here in Assistants, but I'm also using AutoGen, which is another tool that I'll talk about at some point in the future, so that I can do this stuff, or doing this stuff locally on my computer versus through the web. So there's, this is probably it for what I could tell you about the book publishing workflow. But this is just one small piece of the larger goal with the Dabble AI project. So if you're not following this, I'll be publishing more kind of AI workflow breakdowns of all of the, over time, all of the different steps. And so everything from, using LLMs to discover business models that could be automated, to breaking down all of the individual steps that would be involved in running a business. So I think I listed them here. Yeah. So these are just different business model types, but basically, yeah, that's what I'm working on. Hopefully this was helpful if you're interested in using AI to generate a book, or if you're interested in just learning more about AI assistants, agents, agent swarming, and generally automating business processes with AI. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to respond to those, or I'll try to build an assistant to respond to those, which would be better. But either way, let me know. And thanks so much for watching.